Thanks for joining this lecture today. So this is the first lecture on deep generative models. And we are going to have the lecture during the summer. So this is the first time the course is being offered, and it's pretty new. So I guess many of you do know me. I am Ali Rehi. You can find me always here in Bayhin, 7th floor. This is my office, 7208. And you can always write me an email through that email. So I am in your service this semester to just study generative models together. Where do we do it? We do it here on Tuesdays. On Thursday, going to be on the other lecture hall, because this one is out of the sudden booked at this particular time, but it's always 6 to 8 p.m. So same time here. We usually have 2 hours of lecture. I mean, the first 10 minutes, so we should wait. And then we're going to have a kind of 5 to 10 minutes break in between. So that's going to be the classic way of doing it. We're going to have tutorials. The time is not yet set, but I hopefully can just book one of the 2 lecture halls, one of these 2, on the same day, either Tuesday or Thursday, 1 hour before we start here. So if you have any questions, and also if you want to just get some practice on implementation, this is going to be the tutorials that we're going to start probably from the second next week. So who are with us this semester? So we're going to have 4 TAs this semester. So Likan, Mohammad Reza, and we got, 2 people with the same first name. So I'm going to say Amir for the first one, Amir Hussein for the second one. So they are going to help us with all the components. So we're going to have tutorials. So 1 or possibly 2 of them going to do the tutorials, and then we're going to have project supervision and also assignments, which are going to be done with the all TAs. So it might be that you don't see them, but you always can reach them out through email, and you're going to get to know them, depending on the thing you're looking for. Okay, so course page. This semester, I'm not doing any more Kirkus one, because the Kirkus one has a bit of difficulties later on when I want to maintain it for the next semester. So the course page is actually public, so you can access it. Many of you wrote me. You can simply access it. It's a GitHub page. You can just get access to it. And I'm going to upload all the materials on the course page. So the videos, the lecture videos, hopefully they're going to get all recorded. They're going to get uploaded there, and also you're going to get access to the course materials, lecture notes, all the announcements, everything there. But we also have the Kirkus page, so all of you already enrolled in the Kirkus page, and through that one you also have access to Piazza. You can use it, of course. Yeah? So it doesn't mean that we're not using it. So I'm going to use Kirkus if I want to just give you updates. And also, you can always ask questions on Piazza, as usual, but just the material and put the course material and course contents on the original page. That's going to be easier for maintenance next semesters. So feel free to ask questions on Piazza. That's the easiest way if you want to reach me out. As I said, you can always write me an email, but email, it's always lots of emails, so I can simply miss emails, but you can always ask on Piazza. That is harder to miss, right? When I want to miss something, I cannot do it there, but I can do it with my email. So feel free to ask questions on Piazza. And that's pretty much this about logistics, so nothing specific. And what we are going to do this semester, we are trying to study generative AI. So the thing that nowadays is a kind of, a superhero. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's afraid, AI is going to do our jobs and other things. So this is what we are going to study this semester. And we really want to understand what is happening inside this. So that kind of fear probably is going to be gone for you, and then you can just convey this kind of feeling to other people as well. So what is generative AI? So nowadays everybody's using ChatGPT or one large language model based chatbot, right? So ChatGPT is the cool guy for assignments or projects, right? So how does this guy is doing it? I mean, probably you know about the other models. There are a bunch of other models out there. For instance, the Dolly, which is based on diffusion model. Probably you have heard of these words, and some of you even have tried a few things on them. So Leonardo is another generative model which can just generate images. And these guys can generate like very high resolution images, videos, things like this, which are, I mean, a couple of years ago was quite unbelievable. I mean, nobody would have thought this is feasible. And one of the latest things generative models have done is this 2 months ago paper. So 2 months ago, so it's March 12th, people at this startup, Sakana.ai, they wrote a complete scientific paper and did all the analysis and simulations inside that using a generative model. And then they submitted it into a conference, and it got passed. So it got accepted, but of course they withdrew it after getting accepted. But this was a test that they could essentially generate a publication completely by a generative model, which is very human-like study. And this was a kind of, an alarm for many people, right? So what is it doing? So if I want to put them in words, so generative models can pretty much do anything nowadays. So they can write text. I mean, this is the most simple thing you can do with them using large language models. They can write very good codes. You can ask, I mean, those commercial chatbots to write you a long, script of code. And if the coding is not that hard, it's going to do it very efficient, right? So it can do argument, so it can give you, lines of thinking. It's not really thinking. So this is something that hopefully when we are over with this course, you're going to understand that it's not really thinking. It's just mimicking the way of thinking. But to many people, it sounds like thinking, right? And well, it can just generate images, totally new images, never have seen before. They can generate customized videos. As I told you in this latest experiment, it can generate scientific tests or data for experiments. And I mean, even though like generating scientific text is not a very ethical and reliable thing, but generating data for experiments is a kind of very useful tool that they are providing nowadays for us. And now, what we are going to do here, of course, we are not going to sit down and play with them, definitely. So we don't want to do this stuff. We basically want to, first of all, understand that how they really do that. So how we can, starting from deep learning understanding that we have, like basic machine learning, basic deep learning, how we can get into a point to make a model, a bunch of neurons just doing computations, being able to do these stuff, right? So this is the first question that we want to understand the answer. And to understand it, we need to understand lots of basic and advanced notions in statistical learning. This is one of the things that we want to try to understand. And the second thing that we want to understand is that to what extent they are capable, right? So, I mean, hopefully when you're over with the course, if somebody tells you that AI is going to just take my job, you can at least argue logically with them whether this is really going to happen or not. Because nowadays, in this bubble of generative models, lots of things are assumed to be done by people who are not expert, but we don't expect that to happen. And hopefully when you are over with the course, you understand that, well, the state of the art right now is much far away from what they would argue, right? So these are the main two purposes of the course. And now the point is that how we can understand it. So starting, as I said, from the machine learning basics or deep learning basics. Mainly, if you do understand neural networks and how they work, what they can do, then the question is how we can learn, say, generative AI, the term. So it is quite confusing, to be honest. I mean, even for me, when I wanted initially to design this course, it was quite hard for me to just come up with the course, structure, because this is really a big question where we can start. Yeah. So where should we start with generative models? Because you probably have seen lots of things which are somehow linked to generative models, right? For example, large language models. This is the thing right nowadays, right? So, more advanced versions of them, the multimodal large language models. Okay, this is something within generative AI, that's right. But, to be fair, this was somehow developed by people who were working on natural language processing. And I don't want to say that natural language processing is something separate from generative AI. But if we want to formulate generative AI as a kind of framework, then the question is it the main thing that we should understand? Or many of you might have heard of these different kind of generative models, right? So variational autoencoders, generative adversarial networks, or the more recent one, the diffusion models. The question is, what is the difference between these guys and this guy? And the other point is that one generative AI, or is this one generative AI? Or is everything here generative AI? To be fair, everything here is generative AI, of course. They are generating data, if we want to just put it in a very broad context. But the point is that if we want to understand every single of them, probably we need to just target different topics, right? For instance, if you want to understand what is large language model, probably you need to just stick to transformers, right? So you need to have a very deep understanding of transformers, how they work, and then out of understanding that, then you gradually start to understand how large language models work. Whereas when we want to understand the other things like that one, we need to just study other notions. For instance, variational invariance or diffusion process, latent space, what these notions mean and how they can be utilized to design a kind of model which can generate what we are purposing. So the answer to this confusing question, what is in general generative AI and where should we start? To be honest, the answer is quite hard. If you just go out and look on the on internet about different courses on generative or deep generative models or generative AI in general, you're gonna find like very different kinds of course content. So some people are more focused on this part, some people are more focused on the other part, some people put more emphasis on notions from statistical learning, and some people look more computationally on the topic. So what I try in this course, I do my best to just put a kind of fair balance between these two and somehow put everything in a form of a framework. But what I do here is essentially what I just came up by my own. So it might be that you find somebody else better than me, and I totally accept it, challenge accepted, but this is my best trial to just put everything in the form of a kind of same framework. But as I told you, if you want to focus on one particular thing in this domain, then probably the target thing that you need to just get more and more deep into it is a different thing. So there are lots of things involved here. Now, to make it a bit clear what we are going to do in this lecture, so I'm going to give you a very broad overview on the whole context of the course. Hopefully it's going to make it clear for you what we are looking for, and then it's going to gradually through semester these lines of this map that I'm showing here is going to get more and more clear. So one thing that we should all keep in mind here is that when it comes to the problem of learning, so if we just forget about generative AI and we just talk about general learning problem, which means that we want to understand how we can do things that intelligent creatures do using algorithms or codes or lines of mathematical objects, right? If you want to answer this question, there are two totally different viewpoints on this topic, which are connected very much, but they are actually different points of view. The first one is the one which I call it here computational learning. I mean, the term computational learning is quite common. It's not a kind of standard term, but many people use it. What do we mean when we talk about computational learning? We basically mean that we're looking for methods, tools, or what we call them models, architectures, that can somehow mimic the functional representation of something, right? So for instance, I want to understand there is a very complicated function which maps my image into my own class, right? So you look at my image, and very complicated mathematical function is going to look at my image, takes it as input, and gives us the output, this is a human being, right? Label me by the class human being. That is a functional representation of something, and then when you talk about computational learning, you're basically looking for a way to somehow represent that function by a model, right? A neural network, for instance, or maybe more different kinds of models. So here, the whole thing is that you do assume that there exists one functional representation, and the only target, or not only target, but the major target that you're putting in your mind is that you want to somehow approximate that functional representation. Best thing that you can use is neural network, right? Because neural networks are universal approximators. They are going to represent any weird functional representation. And this is why people who are in this domain or somehow is following this point of view are always happy with approaches like deep learning, right? So where have you had this kind of viewpoint? Applied deep learning course, if you had it, this was the basic or the major viewpoint in that course. Because always in that course, we think like, okay, anything happening in this nature is having a functional connection, right? One thing to its label, or I don't know, if I want to group a bunch of parameters, if I want to compress something, there is always a mathematical function, which can take the mathematical object corresponding to this natural process and can turn it into what I want, right? And then my whole purpose is to make a very good, robust, and complex enough neural network which can approximate that functional representation. This is what we call it computational learning. And the people who started working on it are, as I told you, the people started on working on neural network. The most famous one is Rosenblatt, who just came up with the perceptron algorithm, right? So these people are the people who worked on computational learning idea. But there is one parallel literature or parallel point of view to the problem of learning, which is statistical learning. And what do we mean by statistical learning? In statistical learning, you basically look for inference. So what you want to do, you want to understand or infer, estimate the statistical dependency. So you might say, okay, I don't know. I mean, maybe there is a functional representation, maybe there is not, but there is a kind of correlation between my image as a statistical thing, as a kind of, a random sample coming out of all possible images, with the class of human being, right? And I want to understand or somehow develop a kind of method which can realize this dependency, okay? This is what we call it statistical learning. In a statistical learning, you are not looking at those objects in your problem or the things that you are playing around with as a kind of deterministic, fixed mathematical objects. The whole issue for you now is not anymore simply computation. The point is that you think as one image, one text, one video, as a kind of sample coming from a very complicated, very large domain of possibilities, right? And this is coming with some order of randomness, right? And you want to understand how does that randomness look like, because if you understand that one, then you can essentially talk about the class of that image, or maybe you are able even to generate some other samples of the same nature, right? So this is the kind of approach that people use to, again, tackle the problem of learning. The literature is called the statistical learning. This one is more standard term. And the classical courses you might have had, which deal with this kind of approach, one of them is Introduction to Machine Learning, ECE 1513. There we had computational learning in the second half, where we talk a bit about neural networks. But in the first half, we basically talked about the statistical learning, right? So for example, the support vector machines, SVMs, they basically look at the problem from the statistical learning point of view. Also, those people who had information theory, you might know about the Bayesian framework for invariance. So if you see something random, and you do know that this is coming from another random process. Now looking at this one, you want to talk about the original random process. This is, again, statistical learning problem, because you're looking at a random object, and then you want to talk about another random object statistically. I mean, of course, you cannot do it deterministically. Now, I don't mean that these are different things. Like, you can use neural networks in a statistical learning, and people do it, right? The point that I'm making here is that these are different points of view. And when you look at each of these points of view, you look at your problem differently. Now, for many people in the community, like, they could somehow push themselves before all of these generative models. They could push themselves towards one of these directions, right? So for some people, machine learning was simply neural networks, and that means simply computation. For some people, machine learning was basically statistical learning. So computation is nothing specific. We always develop in that sense, right? But the point is that in the context of generative AI, we basically have both of them involved. So you cannot understand generative models literally if you do not have the key ideas from statistical learning. At the same time, none of things that we have right now working as generative models would work if we don't care about the computational point of view, right? So what I'm going to do in this lecture, I try to start with the computational viewpoint. And the main reason is that my experience tells me that people are usually more convenient with the computational point of view. For most people, a model is easier to be thought as a neural network, which has some computational components. They just do some addition and multiplication, and then they're going to give you some output, right? So this is the easier way of thinking about the learning problem. So I'm going to start with this computational viewpoint, and I try to do some data generation using this one. This is going to be the text generation. So basically, we start to play around with what we call it language model, which hopefully we're going to understand what is it today. So we're going to talk about language models, so we're going to focus on the language model first. We do try to understand what is a language model, how we can make it, and then we just focus on in particular on the context-aware language models. Basically, we're going to look at the transformer-based language models. And these transformer-based language models are the grandfather of nowadays LLMs. I mean, LLMs are basically transformer-based language models, which are very large. That's the only difference, right? So we're going to understand how this is going to work. And in this way, I try my best to have a bit of recap on the context, like, for example, sequential data and also transformers, so that those of you who have this a bit forgotten, gonna get a bit recap, but I expect you to just review what you had before in the other courses so that you have a fair understanding of these terms here. So one point that I want to indicate here is that I'm not getting into the world of NLP. And as I told you, it doesn't mean that NLP is something different from generative models. I mean, many generative models do natural language processing for us. That's right. The point is that I'm not going into details of the NLP algorithms because we have a separate course on natural language processing. So if you're interested, you can take it in the winter semesters. So I'm just trying to give you an understanding of what language model is and how we can use it to make text or generate some text, which is a very basic or the very first trial to generate some sort of data. Now, once we get into this one, I try my best to gradually give you the alternative perspective on the problem, meaning that whenever we do something computationally, I'm going to give you the interpretation from a statistical point of view. And maybe for language models, it's not that necessary, so you don't feel this is like crucial to have this understanding. But hopefully, as we discuss it, you're going to get gradually used to those terms and that point of view. And this is the one which is going to help us a lot later on when we get into latent space generative models. So in that respect, for instance, we start to understand what is the language distribution. Once we understand what is the language distribution, we can extend it to the idea of data distribution. What do we mean when we say data distribution? And what do the language models are doing statistically, in the statistical sense? And once we understand it, then we can say, okay, for the harder problems, which we don't have any clue how we can do it as we do it in language models, maybe we can take the alternative perspective from the statistical point of view, and that one is going to help us to address those problems more efficiently. Now, since it's a course and I would like you to have a bit of good understanding on a state of the art, so we are going to get a bit more deeper into the large language models. I mean, they don't have any fundamental difference to the language models, but there are a bunch of terminologies, a bunch of techniques there that people use to make them work. So we're going to take a deeper look into them so that you have a good understanding of them. Mainly, if you get into the world and you want to just practice it, then you don't get afraid of hearing new terminologies. So that is what we do in the first part of the course. Once we finish with the first part of the course, you're going to have a very good understanding of the large language models, and at the same time, you are ready to get a bit more into the more abstract forms of generative models. Now, one thing that I want to indicate here is that you need to know how neural networks work. And there are lots of things, lots of details that I'm going to skip during the lectures because I assume that you have them in mind. So I try my best to give you the reference where you can find them if you have forgotten them, or maybe you have not heard of them completely before. But I cannot review everything in details because we already had those things in other courses, which are considered as the requirement for this course. Okay? So that's the first part, and once we are over with the first part, then we are ready to just get into a more abstract or more wider framework for data generation. So in that sense, we are going to start with just formulating the problem of data generation. So we're going to see what do we mean by data generation. You're going to see that data generation is a very simple statistical problem. You essentially assume that the data that you are generating has a kind of distribution. And the only thing that you want to do is to sample from that distribution, right? Like a random machine generating images, you want to be able to push the bottom of that machine and it generates you an image, right? But this is a very hard thing to do, of course, in practice. So we're going to understand what is data distribution. The whole data generation is to just sample from that distribution. And what kind of approach we can use? Well, we can use, for instance, maximum likelihood, right? We can put a model, try to make it mimic the distribution of that data using the data samples that we have. And when we want to train that model, we're going to use maximum likelihood. So if you have a bit of hard time remembering them or digesting them right now, no worries. I mean, we're going to talk about these things in detail, so there's no problem in that sense. So I just want to give you the overall view on the course. Now, in this respect here, it's good to have a bit of background on the key notions in a statistic and probability theory, but I don't ask you too much. So anything that I feel like is above the basic, I'm going to explain it here in the lecture. So no worries in that sense. Okay? So now, once we got this understanding of the framework, then we essentially have two different ways to do data generation. So for us, data generation is going to be sampling from data distribution. The whole problem is that, first of all, we don't know what is the data distribution or what is it exactly. And the second thing is that how we can sample from that distribution, right? So these are the two things that we need to solve. And the first conventional approach is to just learn the distribution. So put a model. That model is going to tell you what is the distribution of the data. Collect lots of samples from that data. Put that in that model. Use maximum likelihood training to just make that model mimic the distribution of the data. Then start sampling from that distribution which you have approximated. So this is a kind of classical approach. For a long time, people used to do that. I mean, and this is the reason that for a long time you have not heard of generative models, because they are not really working perfectly when it comes to real data. But still, they have a kind of benefit. One of them is, for instance, you can get access to an approximation of the data distribution, which is a good thing in some particular problems. But they are going to be they are somehow targeting a very complicated task, which in practice we are not able to do it really. And the second thing is that those models, even if we can train them perfectly, you're going to see that it's very hard to sample from them. So it's going to make it very hard to somehow, even if you train that neural network, it's very hard to make that neural network gives you one particular image which looks like the one you want, because that is somehow mimicking the data distribution, but you are unable to sample from it. You cannot make it to sample with the same distribution from that space. As I said, this might be a bit confusing right now for you, the terminology, but you're going to see it in details through the semester. So since we cannot do them really in practice, we're going to switch into the state-of-the-art approach. But in this direction, or in this respect, we're going to have a bit of discussions and a few models, because some of them are actually used not as individual generative models for generating complete data, but in different applications for generating other things. So some of them, for instance, autoregression is the main framework in that direction. So you can assume autoregressive models, and then you can use them to generate data. This is one approach, a very old-fashioned approach. And the other one is to use flow or energy-based models, which again try to mimic a kind of distribution, being able to train, and then you're going to train it on the data. But as I told you, it's very hard to make it work for real modality that we have in practice, like a very long text, or if you want to generate images and videos. So once we got to know this stuff, which is quite short part of the course, then we're going to get into the serious part, which is the latent space approaches. And what is the latent space approaches? In latent space approaches, you are not trying to mimic the data distribution. So you don't want to know what is the data distribution, because you do know it's a very hard thing to do. Instead of that, you want to somehow develop one mechanism which directly sample from the distribution. Meaning that you want to learn how you can sample from the distribution without directly knowing what is that distribution. So this is the point where people started to somehow get meaningful results for complicated tasks. Some of the key tools here are variational inference. So it's a kind of framework for doing statistical inference on random objects. But then it turns out that you can actually somehow fit it into a computational framework, a computational model, in order to train it and then do what you want to do. Another thing is the problem of min-max game. So when you think two people are just competing each other, and then one of them wants to maximize its own reward, whereas the other one wants to somehow make that maximized reward minimized because it's going to benefit itself. So this is the other kind of framework that we might need to take a look at. This one, this is basically showing up in GAN. And diffusion process, which again is a kind of a statistical description of diffusing many particle systems. This is again a kind of framework which originally was developed for describing many-body statistical models. In particular, some of them had been somehow applied to thermodynamic systems, but then they are again able to help us by accomplishing this task. And that the task that we are looking for is to learn how we can sample from a specific distribution. Now, in this direction, what kind of approaches we are going to learn? GANs, generative adversarial networks, are one of them. They are nowadays a bit old-fashioned, but still they are working. So we're going to discuss them. And variational autoencoders, some of you, those who had the deep learning course, you had a bit of understanding about this one because we tried it before, but we're going to see it this time from the variational invariance point of view. And then finally, we're going to have the diffusion models, which are the trend nowadays. So nowadays, diffusion models are the one which are very robust for generating modalities like images. DAL-E, for instance, is one of them. So yeah, we're going to take a look into these frameworks. And once we have these understandings, then these frameworks are going to be very clear for us. And then you're going to see that, if you have enough computation, you can essentially do it easily. The whole frameworks that were described here. So this is the main body of the course. So the main thing that we do in this course, the part 2 of the course, is this one. So essentially, we are going to do our best to realize this particular task, sampling from the data distribution. And we're going to try different approaches. Each of them has its own notions. And I do my best to just give as much as necessary for each of them so that you do not get overwhelmed with all the details, but at the same time to a good depth so that you feel confident that at some point, if you want to really go for it, you are able to do that. Okay? So that being said, I expect that the last 1 or 2 weeks gonna be free of those topics, and then we have a bit of time to get into a bit of more advanced topics in the generative AI. So in particular, I'm going to take a look at multimodal LLMs. Once we're over with LLMs, you do know that it's not a big deal to make it multimodal. The only thing is about the computation and how you can connect these modalities to each other. But we're going to talk about the trending approaches. Okay? So we're going to have a bit of discussion on this one because nowadays it's a kind of thing, especially when it comes to the research area, and also the conditional generative models. Whatever we have learned before, then we're going to see how we can make them conditional, which again, data distribution. Now, instead of that, you want to sample from a conditional data distribution, which is again okay, right? So once you understood the main body, these are a very simple things to understand. So if you want to know more about the detailed content, you can check the course page. And that being said, let's just have a bit of other discussions on logistics. So one thing is about the course components, like any other courses, I guess. We have assignments, midterm, and final projects. So how many assignments do we have? We have 10 assignments. No, I'm joking. 3 assignments. 3 assignments. Okay. 3 assignments. And I want to insist, try to do them by your own. I do know that ChatGPT can do that. And I do know that it's hard for any of us to understand whether it's been done by a human being or ChatGPT. But do it by your own, because it's going to help you a lot understanding the course content. So this is a very important thing. And one thing that I want to insist on, that this is not a kind of, additional thing you're supposed to do. It's really a part of the course. So sometimes I hide a few notions, a few things to learn inside the assignments, and those things are going to help you later to understand other things. So it's very important to do them on time and do them by your own so that you get a good understanding. So a bit of, hush-hush things. So you have the full mark if you just submit it by the deadline. You can do 2 days delay, but each day is going to be 10%. And I'm sorry, I cannot, to be fair to everyone, I cannot just extend simply the deadline. So this is about the assignments. So as I told you, these are not supplementary things. These are really a part of your learning process. They are somehow covering half of the coursework you're doing. So this is really important that you do it all by your own and do it in time. Take your time, and you're gonna see that it's gonna really help you understanding better the course contents. So that's about the assignments. The other thing is about the midterms. So for the midterm, I put it on this date because I checked this is quite in the middle of semester. And the point is that after this one, I think, or on this week, we have some of these LSM, like teaching stations, getting updated. So because of that, we cannot record really the lectures. So it's going to be this, I put it this day. The place, I don't know it yet. I need to coordinate it. But it's going to be on the lecture time with 1 extra hour because, it's late, right? So anyways, it doesn't matter. So, yeah. So in the exam, I'm not going to ask you for any programming task. It doesn't make sense because you do assignments and projects dealing with the programming. So it's going to be only question about the fundamentals and concepts. So basic questions that you can solve them by hand. You're going to get some sample of them in the assignments, and this is going to be basically that one. So as long as you understood the basics properly, then it's totally fine. So the final thing is the final project. So that is, to me, this is the most interesting and important part of the course, because this is somehow giving you the self-confidence that you are someone expert on this topic. So now, how we do it as usual. We are going to make groups. What is the size of the group? So with the current course registrations, I probably need to make it 3 or 4, but I would wait for a week or two to decide. So if we have the same number of students in the lecture, then probably we're going to have either a group of 3 or 4, because we are somehow limited in the number of groups we can cover. Now, each group is going to choose a topic. I am going to give you a list of predefined topics that you are supposed to take from them. That doesn't mean that you cannot do any open-ended project. If you have anything in mind, you're more than welcome to do that. But for that one, you need to somehow first discuss it with us, so with the teaching team, to make sure that both the level and also the milestones of the project are going to match by the ones which we have given you as the predefined projects. So you're going to have one briefing. So since the proposal is either made by us or you are just going to discuss it with us, so there is no proposal anymore, proposal submission. So you just need to choose your group, and then once you have chosen, choose your topic, and once you have chosen, then on week 10, so 4 weeks before you present, you're going to give us a briefing. And the briefing is halfway written report, right? So you're going to explain what the problem is, you're going to formulate the problem, give all the details in that, and anything left for the remaining 4 weeks, you can just present it in your final report. And then in the week after the last lecture, we are going to have one internal seminar, and then each group is going to take a few minutes to present their work, and also you're going to have to submit the final report. So one thing that I want to again indicate here, the final project is somehow substituting the final exam in this course. And this is very important that, again, you do it by your own. And for this one, I am being really serious. So if I feel like anything is not being properly studied in the project, it's a very big deduction for me, because this project is supposedly doing a kind of through semester examination for you. So whatever you learn in the course, you're going to understand whether you need it or not, and then you're going to apply it on your project or not, right? And if you want to apply it, you need to learn all the means to be able to apply it, right? And this is where every resources on internet is going to help you. You can just search online, you can use ChatGPT or whatever chatbot you use. You can use them to accomplish those tasks, particular tasks, but you are not supposed to ask some, intelligent system to just do this project for me, and I don't want to touch anything in that, right? So it's going to be very important for me that you do it by your own. I don't care that much about the output of the project. I more pay attention to how much effort you have put on the project and how much original the project is. So it's very important to do it by your own and do it through semester so you don't leave everything for the very last minute. So that being said, this is the overall course calendar. You can find it on Kirkus as well. So as I said, week 8 is the exam. So we're not going to have any lecture on that week. And there are a bunch of deadlines for the assignments and the project, which you can follow. I mean, I do my best to follow this schedule, but it might be that a few days or 1 week we get forward, backward. So let's see. Okay, now about the lectures. So the lectures are in person. That means that you're supposed to attend the lecture. And I do know that this is late, but this was in particular asked by many students because it's in summer. So some of you are doing summer jobs. So this is why we put it in late in the afternoon. So really, attendance is important. It doesn't mean that I'm going to check whether you are here or not, but I really suggest that you do attend the lectures. So we are going to have recordings on the teaching station, but this is not the most reliable thing. And the other thing is that the recording are going to capture only my voice and the slides. So they are not going to capture anything else going on in this lecture hall. So as I said, I strongly advise you to attend. The main reason is that you don't want to lose me, right? You don't want to lose the way that I present the course. So some students in the other course have seen that I could just disappear an elephant, right? I can do it, so maybe I do it again in this lecture. You want really to attend. This is important. And the other thing, as I said, sometimes I need to use the board, and I cannot capture it, unfortunately, by the videos. So it's going to help you better understand. And it also helps me really to get involved with you because I can ask questions and going to make the whole course more interactive. So few things about the programming. So don't get tired. I mean, we're almost over it. So regarding the programming, of course, we are going to do lots of programming, and all of them we are going to use Python. So I assume that you have a good understanding of coding in Python. Namely, you're happy with using NumPy, Matplotlib, I don't know, PyTorch, things like this. These are all okay for you because I do know that you learned them in the other courses. In the first tutorial lecture, there's going to be one overview on the key things that you might need, for instance, PyTorch. But rather than that, if you have a bit of lag in those, you miss a few backgrounds on that, I suggest that you go ahead and try to review that before we get more serious into the semester. So one thing that I extremely suggest is that you do experimenting, whatever we do here. So I do understand some of the things that we discussed here are very hard to be to experiment because basically, I mean, you need a huge computation, right? And you don't have access to it. But there is always a very dummy, simple version of everything, right? And you can always try to do experiments with them because this is not important what comes out of the experiment. The experiment is going to give a very solid understanding of those topics to you. So I'm going to show you a few things in the language models, and you're going to see that, I mean, you can implement a transformer, very basic transformer, with your own computer, and it's not going to work, of course, but it's still a very good practice that you see you can do implementation. So this means that if you have the computation, then you are fine. Regarding the prerequisites, so as I told you, fundamentals and deep learning are really important. So you need to have a good understanding of notions in machine learning, like what is model, what is data set, what do we mean by training, what is risk minimization, what is neural network, and a bit of understanding of basics in probability and statistics, but we're not going to ask too much from for the second one. So now, if you have done applied deep learning or introduction to machine learning or anything equivalent to these two courses, this is totally fine. If you are in doubt, you can discuss it always with me. Okay, so you just let me know whether you are in doubt, you can handle it or not, then we can check the courses you had before. So I put you a bit of review lectures and some key points on deep learning, so you can see them on the watch them on the course page. So if you want to recap some key concepts in deep learning, you can take a look at that one. Or whenever you find like something a bit faded in your mind, then you can just go ahead and check the reviews. For the resources, one of them, I mean, there is no real textbook for generative AI because this is a kind of new thing, and each part of it somehow developed in different literature. So there are a bunch of things, like I have, like for example, this deep learning book by Bishop. Bishop, you do know the other book, which is statistical learning, right? The one we use for EC 1513. So that one you had. This is the newer one, which is about deep learning, and in some part of it is talking about approaches for data generation. So you can take a look at it when you want to have a deeper understanding on a few things. Probabilistic machine learning is a good thing to just recap a few key notions in statistical learning. The famous deep learning book by Goodfellow, it has one particular chapter, which is about generative models, but it's a very shallow chapter, so it just touches the basic concepts. It doesn't go that deep into it. But I mean, whenever I feel it's useful, I'm going to mention it in the lecture. And there are two other books. These are the books recently published, and they are written by people who have done a good lines of implementational and teaching contributions to this area. So they are mostly hands-on books, but if you're looking for something that you can use to get more deep into the implementational aspects, they are good books. But anything that you need, I'm going to upload it on the course page, so you're going to have access to the lecture notes always. And anything extra, any further reading that you might need, I'm going to list them for the lecture, so you're going to have access to them. These are only for further read. Now, since we are over, yes, slide 21, let me do this contract here. So the instructor, it's me, keeps the right reserved for himself to modify the slides last minute before the lectures, right? So don't complain about that, sorry. And sometimes after the lecture, when I do typos, and those who had lectured with me, they know that I am known as the king of typos. So I do lots of typos in my slides. If that happens, I need to update it. Please do not complain about that. I do my best to make it minimal, but I cannot promise that it's going to be nothing like that happening. So also, the instructor keeps the right reserved for himself to deliver the lecture notes in the form of mini batches, section by section. So nobody complains that I want to know I want you to spoil the episode, I don't know, 21. I'm not going to do that because I'm not that well-prepared person, right? So I'm going to take my time before the lectures to prepare these slides or play around with them. So I'm going to give you in the mini batches. So I always give you enough that you're going to have for 1 or 2 next lectures. But I mean, the rate is, influenced by many things. So everybody's happy with these terms, right? So you're going to sign it right now. And we're going to go ahead with the final few things. So yeah, gloom, you know it, right? Yeah. So I think I told you many times about gloom. This guy is was a minion in an animation, a children cartoon long time ago. And the guy was always believing that nothing is going to work. So this guy is going to be with us through the whole semester and asking lots of questions, and I try to answer all of them. What do I mean by that? I basically mean that I'm going to consider the level of the course for the people who have somehow zero understanding of generative models. And I do know that many of you have practiced few things, or maybe a lot of things, and maybe you do know even something better than me, but I need to keep the pace of the course coordinated by the people who are trying these stuff for the first time. And that being said, it might be at some point of the course, a few things I'm explaining it too much. It makes it a bit annoying, but please be patient with that so we have everybody with us during the course. Because if I just jump something and some people get lost, then they are unable to follow the course. It doesn't make sense, right? So we need to just do it all together. So, as I told you, this is the first time I'm making I'm offering this course, and most of things in the course I just made them by my own. So that means that it is very vulnerable to mistakes, and there are many things that maybe I am not doing it perfectly, right? So I would really want you to challenge me whenever you find something doesn't make sense to you. Please ask it. Don't take it for granted that I'm doing it perfectly, because I'm not, right? So I'm not the best guy teaching this course right now, maybe, right? So maybe you have seen it in other courses, other resources, and you have your own argument against me. So always feel free to ask it. There is no problem with asking me or challenging me. I would be more than happy that you do it to me. And that being said, there is nothing that we call it stupid questions. And if you don't believe on it, just click on this blue text. There is a Wikipedia page for this statement. No such thing as a stupid question. So there is nothing that you can ask which sounds stupid. I mean, there are two types. I mean, one question either has an answer or does not, right? If I can answer it, I'm going to answer it. If I cannot, then there is no reason for the question to be stupid, right? So if I say it's stupid, it simply means that I'm unable to answer it. So don't worry about that. Be always critical to whatever I say, and whatever doesn't sound meaningful to you, just please ask it through the semester, because interaction is the most important thing in the lectures, right? I mean, if you don't want to do interaction, probably you just watch the videos, right? I don't want this to happen. So that being said, any questions?